What's up? We are live. Welcome to Wellness Wednesdays with CJ. It is me, your girl, Christian Jackson, the daddy issues expert, and I am a licensed therapist here in Columbia, South Carolina. I help women recover from relationship trauma, and I'm really excited to bring you the last Wellness Wednesday of the year, honey. Okay. Super excited about this because I have been working really hard this year. Really on my brand and how I show up for you and support you and serve you guys. And I have been listening and hearing what you have to say. I appreciate the engagement so far and hoping that it continues. And so tonight we are talking about a very much anticipated subject, and I'm really excited to get into it. For those of you, before I do that, who don't know me, then you can go back and check out my content. Get to know me, scroll through. You have so much to go through. I give lots of things away for free. And so you can find me couchwithchristian.com. That is my website. You can also find me at couchwithchristian on Instagram, and that is where I am super active. And so you can find all the shenanigans there. And I hope that you do and engage with me and give me your opinions. They don't have to agree with me. It's totally fine. Let's just get the conversation going about daddy issues. So you heard me call myself the daddy issues expert. You see it here on the screen. I wrote books about them. This is Daddy Issues: How to Detangle from the Sins of Our Fathers, and Her Sister, the workbook, where you get to do a little bit more work that will kind of expand upon what you do in the book already, because I give you so much in the book already, so that you can process what happens in the chapters. So the goal of what I'm trying to do for the Daddy Issues movement is to destigmatize the shame and the guilt that comes with daddy issues. I want to hopefully help you put different language and perspectives on what daddy issues means to you, and how can we increase empathy for the women who are really just dealing with emotional trauma. And so the more we talk about trauma, the more we talk about the hard things, the easier it'll be for us to accept things. And when I say accept, it doesn't mean we like it or don't like it. We don't put a judgment on it necessarily. We just get into, okay, this is a thing, we're going to call it this, and now what? And so that's what I want to get into tonight. So I'm really excited to have some new people here. Hey, Tier. Because this is going to hopefully help get eyes on the movement that I hope to lead. And I'm meeting some new daddy issues experts here. One's here tonight already in the chat. So please engage with me here. I'm really privileged to meet people who want to serve the way that I do and get this conversation going. The other piece of this is daddy issues according to Christian Jackson is what's in the book. I give you a diagnosis. I give you some words, some language to put to it so that we can just stop calling us hoes and sluts and all the things that come to mind when you think daddy issues. That is near and dear to my heart. That is something that is a very personal mission of mine. But what you're not going to do, and I don't say this a lot, okay, what you're not going to do is come back here and say, hey, Christian said I got daddy issues, and so that means I can pop off at my man. I can go off on my boss. That's not what we're not going to do, okay? Because women who have recovered from daddy issues or are recovering from daddy issues hold themselves accountable, okay? You call it what it is. This is my 10-year-old self who was waiting on daddy to come, and he didn't. Shown out in my marriage, okay, whatever it lays on the spectrum. So I see you guys trickling in. Hey, Michelle. I'm really excited to have a conversation with one of my very best friends for like 15-20 years tonight. She is a friend to the show, and Jessica Van is not new to this thing. She's also a licensed therapist, and she does a really great job of breaking down sex. Okay, let's get into it. Now, before we do, I do want to say a couple of things. This is a very it's a much anticipated conversation. It could be a fun conversation, but I do want to say I understand that it is not fun for everyone. Okay, so let me just go ahead and put my trigger warning here. Feel free to, first of all, log off if you are triggered, because I do treat women and have treated women who have been sexually assaulted by their fathers. That is a real thing. I write a letter to you at the end of my book. I have talked about that privately more so than publicly. And I do want to make sure that you guys understand that I get it. And I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't give you that permission, quote unquote, to log off if you need to. Okay. Because that can bring up some other stuff that you may not want to touch. It's probably why some people haven't logged on at all. Right. So please give yourself permission to breathe, through whatever discomfort comes your way when we do talk about sex tonight, okay? I want you to have fun with it. Sex is a beautiful thing. It can be a fun thing. But there are some blocks, right, that come with the entire act. And I do want you guys to be real with yourselves tonight. Okay. This does not replace your relationship with a licensed therapist. There are two that's going to be in here tonight. And just because we interact and kiki on the internet tonight, that don't mean that we're your therapist. We want to be able to point you in the right direction of where to go to find the support. It's all about having the conversation, you guys. And so once again, get to know me on my content. You can go back and see what I call daddy issues. I want you to be able to name what your trauma is. Do you even call it trauma? Are you a daddy's girl who may not quickly see what daddy issues are? That's totally fine. I just posted a snippet of someone actually really explaining that from the last time that we were together. So speaking of that, we have been building up to this conversation. I do love God's timing. It's so much better. So we were supposed to have this conversation, quote unquote, like 2-3 weeks ago. But around that time, Jessica was ill, and she modeled for us what self-care is. And that is, sis, no, I can't do this tonight. And that's totally fine. So what we did was have our first conversation with our guests. It was Cassandra, Troy, and Yancy. They are relationship coaches, and they got on here and told us about how dating looks today. So if you have not caught that, I did a couple of snippets. I shared them here on my page on Facebook. I shared it on my Instagram. Get to know what they have to say. I really love the way Cassandra specifically talked about how it could be you getting in your own way when it comes to connecting to people. That's one thing. So we got into that hour-long conversation. We had a whole panel and a lot of fun that night. Last week, we got to meet Taylor Chandler, and she is the attachment GOAT. Okay, she's out of Atlanta, Georgia. Super dope sis. Love her work and what she has to offer. We cannot talk about daddy issues without talking about attachment styles, right? And the attachment theory. So she did a great job of helping you see how and why you show up in relationships. Are you more on the secure side of things, or are you on the insecure side? She really normalized for us that the insecure side is where it's at. It's like a little party. So go back and watch that too and see how you can reach more of a secure attachment with self, so that you can show up in a healthier way with your partner. I have a chapter about attachment in my book as well. You can find that on my website, and I'll tell you how to get that. And tonight, we have laid the foundation with the guest, right? I like to bring people who are smarter than me, who have way more ways to say the things that I've been saying to you guys. And so we got a good buildup, a good foundation for tonight's conversation about daddy issues and sex. I will be watching the chat. I'm here just to facilitate the conversation and like Jessica do her thing. I just want you guys to know I'm watching the chat. Feel free to pop them in, okay? I will get to them. I'm super excited. We're both really good with on-the-fly things. Tag a friend. If you need to pop out real quick, tag and share, please do that. Without further ado, I'm going to bring on Jessica. Looks like you're ready. You ready, sis? Okay, she's giving me the nod. Reintroducing Jessica Van. And hey, sis.
Hello. And so I have to remember when I'm actually on the show, because I just love watching Christian do her thing. So I'm like here, like, yes, okay, yeah, let's get. Oh, she about to throw to me, okay. But yeah, I'm excited to be here again.
Yes, I'm super excited, girl. You got new letters behind your name. What is this?
Let me tell you, so I had made them up, okay. So I love people's alphabet soup, right? So I'm like making stuff up and hoping that nobody sue me. So essentially, I am Jessica Van. I'm a licensed professional counselor here in the state of South Carolina. I'm nationally board certified. Honestly, I don't even know what that really means, but I pay for that, so I put it there. And then this new thing, MSS, Mom Support Specialist. So if anyone who's a part of the couch crew is also a visionary, thank you. And if you've been following me, you probably like, what is she doing? Why is she talking about all this mom stuff all of a sudden? We all go through stages and phases of our life, right? So sex is a huge part of my life. It's always been a huge part of my life, kind of if I wanted it to or not. And as I'm getting more comfortable with my relationship, being more present and open with my partner, I'm realizing the shift is really becoming a more present wife and mom. And so I have expanded my services into supporting mom in that way and helping them to find the sexy and the messy of parenting, right?
Hey.
Like, I hear from so many moms that I don't have time for sex. Who got time to be cute? Look, I am serving rush mom realness. My goal, my goal was to put my youngest in bed by 7:30, right? So we started this at 7:20. At 7:40, I'm like, I know Christian is prompt, and she looking at her computer like, where, because I was doing mom things. So I got on my God loves sex tea.
Ooh, get
because,
into it.
as Christian said, it's a beautiful thing. I threw on a lip. I never understood why my mom would put on lipstick and no face, but I get it. I get it now. I'm drinking out of a Century Chew straw because I can't find straws. It's momming's a huge part of my life. But the sex part is equally as important. So I wanted to come on here because I still talk about sex and just have this conversation because it's an important one to have.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much. And at the end, I do want you to talk more about what you got coming up for the mom support specialty. So y'all hang on tight because Jess has got some really exciting things. And I just love watching you evolve and watching the shift. And so I do want to say that it was really fun going through your Instagram and trying to find stuff about sex. And I was like, shit, like you ain't talked about it in a minute.
Girl, is you doing it? Like, what's happening? Yeah, but
what's going on? Yes, but it's just fun to watch the evolution, and that is exactly what we need to talk about now, which is like the evolution of how, for me, sex has looked in my life. You kind of alluded to this. Sex has been a huge part of your life, right? And so for me, as I was preparing for this, I was thinking about how I've had a lot of it, and child, I'm tired. Okay, it just is what it is. And I was trying, like, there's we talk about and hear about sexual identity. Sex was a huge part of my identity, I think, for a long time, because it's what I thought I had to offer, and I thought that was it. And so for people who knew me in undergrad, and knew how I was moving, this finding myself and really kind of coming to terms and identifying daddy issues for me is really a big part of, like, sex was a huge part of it. Sex was for me a definitely, that was Christian in her avoidant space. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me ask you this first question. And I see you, Starkey. Thank you for showing up. I know Crystal has been very excited about this conversation, and we both know her personally. So thank you for being here tonight. Let's get into, like, I think a jumping point and something that I learned from you when I consult with you about certain things that my clients may need as it relates to kind of explaining sex and really showing up in those spaces. You taught me about sexual scripts. I think this is a good place for us to start. So tell us about this.
Yes. So the way I explain this to clients is I bring in the millennial aspect of phones. Essentially, we all have phones, most of us iPhone users. And if you don't close your apps, there are things running in the background. Our scripts, more specifically our sexual scripts, is the programming of how we think about sex and how we interact with the idea of sex that constantly runs in the background of our mind. These scripts are shaped by what we learned about sex in our homes, what we learned about it through our friendships, the whack-ass sexual education that we get here in the Bible Belt, and our own personal experiences. These scripts are how we operate sexually. And a lot of times they are detrimental, and we don't realize that they are detrimental because that's our automatic programming. Sexual scripts, for a lot of people, and this is something they don't recognize, they begin at birth. When children are born, they explore their bodies. I believe firmly that our creators gave us these bodies. He wants us to be very familiar with how they work, what they look like, all the things. And when you're changing a baby's diaper, you may notice that they're touching their private parts. I have seen and heard and even done myself. No, don't do that. So we are reinforcing that already, that it's wrong for a child to touch their bodies. That later grows into a child who's ashamed to be naked, or, you know, very cautious about, like, the way they interact with their body in front of other people or even in their private time. So that script is the background programming that eventually evolves or stays the same and really stunts us sexually.
Stunts us. Okay, so you're bringing up a
Mm-hmm.
good point. Something that I was thinking that I really wanted to touch on, which was trauma.
Mm-hmm.
You say it sounds like basically there is like I like to use the iOS like operating system to update for our
Yes.
iPhones
Mm-hmm.
as an
Mm-hmm.
example of how we can get stuck. So like imagine guys us using the Macintosh software in 2021.
Come on, Oregon Trail. Like, you know what
Okay.
I mean? you still using Oregon Trail and it is not going to translate.
It's not.
So and trauma, because you brought up trauma,
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
looks different for everyone, right? We often, when we think of sexual trauma, we think about sexual assaults and molestation, those types of things. It can be as simple as, I have a son, thank God I have
Mhm.
not yet discovered this, but it can be
Mhm.
as simple as finding that stiff sock and being like,
Oh,
what you
not stiff
doing?
sock.
What you
Right.
what is this? What?
Uh-huh.
Moms, just find the stiff sock and put it in the wash.
Mhm.
Then you can have a conversation. There needs to be conversations. I have a family member who is in their 60s and still talks about to this day when they were caught masturbating and being beat for that.
Mm.
And so, how that robbed her of pleasure for a long time. Again, we are supposed to explore these bodies. How do you know how things work if you don't explore them? You can't expect a partner to know that.
Mhm.
So, that is traumatic. There's big T and little t traumas. That's a
Mhm.
little t traumas. And I tell my client, you get to identify it as a big T or little t. It is what it is to you. But I would classify something like that as a little t trauma that can eventually grow into a big thing that disconnects you from your body.
Mhm.
And I want to say, when I say disconnects you from your body, sex starts in the mind. So
Mhm.
these scripts that are running in the background, that's where sex starts. And if
Mhm.
you can't get into your body and access those scripts and decide what works for you and what no longer works for you, then you can't experience pleasure to its fullest. It almost
Mhm.
becomes performative, which is why a lot of people have difficulty reaching climax, pleasing partners, pleasing themselves, because they're really just acting. They're carrying out a role that doesn't fit them
Mhm.
anymore.
Mhm. Doesn't fit them anymore. That is,
Mm-hmm.
you're touching on so many things, and I guess I just wanna connect it for our audience when we're talking about trauma and the fact that we get stuck on the Oregon Trail of sex, if you
Mm-hmm.
will.
Mm-hmm.
To continue with that metaphor, girl. You're so crazy.
I miss Oregon Trail, but still,
Listen,
it don't work with this computer.
yes, and it worked at one time, right? So that's
Yep.
the thing about trauma is even our responses, whatever happened in the moment, if my stomach dropped or my palms start to sweat, like those are things that God gave us as
Yeah.
cues, like there's something wrong, there's a threat. And those things serve a purpose for us, but sometimes we get stuck in that if we don't interrupt the fact that there's no harm here. We don't have to do
Mm-hmm.
that. So the person you were talking about who associates who got slapped on the hand for masturbating, like that is obviously a trauma response for that person because they're stuck in what their message is about sex and touching
Absolutely.
themselves or discovery. Like that just kind of, it's a huge link, I think, to um that shame piece is really a huge connector for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people, or a disconnector, if you will.
Yeah, it becomes associated less about the pleasure and more about the pain. This thing was painful for me. And,
Hmm.
I say that the brain has two major functions, everything else is icing. One, it's
Hmm.
supposed to keep you alive. That
Period.
is its main function.
Hmm.
Second, it's supposed to keep you from uncomfortable situations. And sometimes it can't differentiate between something that's just uncomfortable, like, okay, I got popped for doing that. That's uncomfortable. I now need to find an appropriate place and time, maybe. It
Hmm.
can't differentiate what's uncomfortable from what might actually kill me. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like,
Hmm.
because that becomes a trauma, and your body says, this thing is so big. My heart's racing, I'm sweating, my blood pressure is up. Your body might think it's going to die when in fact
Hmm.
those two things aren't there. You're connecting something that they don't go together, right? Unless
Mm-hmm.
that's your
Mm-hmm.
thing, and that's a whole nother situation. But those things
Right.
generally don't go together.
And so now I'm thinking about if we link this to daddy issues, and I guess what I'm hearing you say is basically messages. You're talking about we're getting
Yes.
different messages in different ways. What have you heard in your work? What do you kind of attribute to daddy issues as it relates to sexual scripts?
So I'll tell you, there's a number of things, and I have my book here. So
Hey.
I actually bought two copies. So this one looks
Mhm,
unread because it is, because my other one's upstairs. But I actually was looking at the criteria of daddy issues and
mhm,
trying to prepare for that particular question. So these
mm,
thoughts or feelings of abandonment or worthlessness and making decisions, the way that those connect is if your father was absent, if your parent was
mhm,
absent, especially your father, research shows that women who've had emotionally unavailable fathers, physically absent fathers, they are more likely to associate sex with interest. So if they are
mm,
interested in a man, they will give sex because it's being of service, because they
mm,
associate there was something that maybe I didn't do, not sexually, but something I
mhm,
did not give to my dad, which is the reason
mhm.
why he left. Again, not sexually. But
Right.
then you think about, well, what can I do for this man that I'm interested in and I know nothing about? I can give him
Mhm,
sex.
mhm,
The phrase daddy issues alone, I
mhm.
love, of course I'm biased because you're my girl, but this is actually really important because this movement of like, let's reclaim that and let's turn it into something else is so important, because the whole term has been used to discredit and belittle women and take
Mhm,
away their power and autonomy where it comes to pleasure, to
mhm,
act as if they are being driven by something else.
mm.
When you look up the term daddy issues in sex, right? Because I wanted to be prepared. I'm gonna
Right.
like go, if you don't check the images, don't check the images, okay?
Mhm,
Good thing I work for myself, because if this was on my work computer, I'd be fired. There's
mhm,
nothing but porn images,
mhm,
salacious erotica, because people fetishize this idea of
mhm,
a broken woman who is
mhm,
only capable of giving sex.
mhm,
And so when I have clients who identify as people who have daddy issues, because I bring this up and I say, this sounds really familiar to this thing, they instantly go into the messages they receive from their dad about sex.
mhm, mhm,
Um, if I showed interest in a boy, I got, why are you being a hoe? You need to
mm,
focus on your work. If
mhm,
I, asked my dad about, well, what do boys expect? Like, try to have a logical conversation with your parents about dating. They
mhm.
were met with, you shouldn't be thinking about that. You need to keep your legs closed. Why? And then on the other end, if they have brothers, they're seeing them being prepared for this thing.
It's confusing, right? Mhm,
Here's a box of
mhm,
condoms.
mhm,
Personally, I remember my dad buying an industrial size box of condoms. I didn't even know they came in this size.
mhm,
I have four brothers, and he's handing out strips of condoms. So I say, well, where are mine? And my mom's like, yeah,
mhm,
where are Jessica's? Oh, that's not her job. So I learned that it
mm,
wasn't my job to protect myself sexually. That
mm.
if I was in a sexual situation, I should be looking to my partner to protect myself. That stripped me of my own, of providing security for myself.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
thank God that I learned very quickly, no, that's not going to work for me. But there are
mhm,
people who don't. There are people who haven't learned that.
mhm,
So it goes back to those messages and what women are being told by the men in their life, because daddy issues is not just your father, it's
mhm,
your uncle, it's your brothers, it's the things that you see around you. I wore this shirt because sometimes it's your heavenly father.
mhm,
Sometimes it's
mhm,
the messages you receive from church about sex and pleasure. I have married couples and married women who say, well, I don't know what to do now. I was never prepared.
Mm-hmm.
Their spiritual fathers didn't prepare them for what it looks like to be a wife and to be able to do what they say wives are supposed to be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it all goes back to messaging.
Yes, all the messaging, all the scripts. And T in the chat is saying, she's saying, yes, speak, ma'am. Sex was security.
Mm,
And last week we talked about attachment, and Taylor did a really great job of breaking that down as far as like a more anxious attachment style, which was mine.
yes.
And she also helped me see the, I guess, combination of the two. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she said, she likes to call herself, I don't want to misquote her, but she said the secure piece. Like I present as primarily secure, but then also with some fearful and avoidant tendencies,
Mm-hmm.
which could look like, let me kind of spread around my love, um, you know, or my attention or what I have to offer because I'm afraid that I may be left.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't want to show up was what a comment that I made about being seen. How
Yeah.
would daddy see me if I were to be out here in these streets? If I was for the streets, would I be accepted? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that it's this twisted thing that I think get so confused and lost for those of us who, of course, we've all been kids. We're underdeveloped, we're not mature. So how can I possibly understand what I'm supposed to do with my body? Why is it that I see daddy out here kicking it and he for the streets and I can't be? Like, what does that mean? I don't understand. I'm getting conflicting messages, and you brought that great point up about the Heavenly Father piece, and that was my experience personally, where I was pretty much taught, the purity narrative as far as,
Mm-hmm.
if I have sex before I'm married, then I am tainted in some way,
And
and
less than.
less than. And
Mm-hmm.
so, why is it okay for you to go and sleep around with whoever you want to as a man? May not be your dad, like you pointed out, all these men, the father figures, but I cannot. And,
And you're
I may
rewarded
not live
for it.
that life. You're,
Yeah.
just reinforcing the whole thing. And so,
It's no one's running around saying, "Oh, he's out there in the streets because he's got mommy issues." Like he's looking for a mom,
facts.
And,
Facts.
and the thing about it is, I think what's missing from that conversation, I realize that my viewpoint is not widely accepted, but there's a colleague of mine by the name of Brittany Brodus. I would urge everyone to go check her out. She goes to churches and she talks about intimacy from a Christian lens. And she really does away with this shaming of sex before marriage. Because
Mm,
once again, I believe, I say this a lot, pleasure is the point.
mhm,
God has given us these bodies and he's given us free wills. Does he want us to take care of our bodies? Absolutely. Does he
mhm,
want us to spread ourselves thin? No, he does not.
mhm,
But he wants
mhm,
you to make the choice and he wants it to be an informed choice. What
mhm,
I share with my son is something that I don't believe a lot of people share with their sons, but they spread to their daughters. I tell him, you are the prize, not your
mhm,
virginity. And
mhm,
I remember coming up being like, my virginity was the prize, that I had very little worth.
mm,
It was about what I could give away.
mhm,
And being a survivor of child sexual abuse, I was like, I'm always going to make the choice. I'm
mhm,
always. So when I decided to give myself away, it really was an act of empowerment for me until it wasn't.
right,
Until I
right,
realized
mhm,
that's not such a great script.
mhm,
But this message of young girls' virginity being the prize is so damaging because
mhm,
it's not. Your mind is the prize. Your character is the prize. And so I
mhm,
tell my son the same thing. I say, when you make this decision, I hope that you're um, open enough to come to me and have the conversation so that we
mhm,
can prepare you for this, because there are consequences that come with it. When his 3-year-old sister is throwing shit across the table at dinner time, I'm
mhm,
like, so do you think that at 13 you would be ready for that? And he's
mhm.
like, Mom, it's dinner time. But this, I'm like, this is an appropriate conversation, because
Yes.
if you go out and have sex, this could be a possible consequence.
Mhm,
And do
mhm,
you think, sir, who can't even charge your Nintendo and it's something you like to do you think that you'd be ready for that responsibility? And
Don't
he
do
usually
that.
says, I know, right? Thank goodness he says no. And he's
Mhm.
at a point where right now he's like, I don't even think I want kids, so that's a plus.
Mhm. Mhm.
But reminding him and reminding her that the choice is yours. The decision is when you are ready to make said decision, and you are the prize. They are getting something too.
Mhm.
And is
Mhm.
this the person you want to share that prize with? And it's not your virginity. Again, it's you as a person.
Yes. I love that. Separating it and making it plain that you have
Mm-hmm.
something more to offer. And Michelle K is in the chat saying the purity culture in the church can be so damaging. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I worked really hard, I would say more consciously than not, to not get pregnant or, because I was having sex in high school. And um, I know now it was way too early for me. But I do want to
Mm-hmm.
touch on this point that the reason I did have sex at 15 years old for the very first time was I want to say it was by choice because it was consensual,
Mm-hmm.
but at the time it was out of, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose this man or this boy because he was
Mm-hmm.
also 15. Um that anxious piece of me where I would sacrifice my needs and the morals I had at the time, as a 15-year-old person. By now, my parents were separated, and a lot of what I was doing at the time was trying to perform, like I think you mentioned a little earlier, for the attention of daddy. If I get all
Mm-hmm.
A's, maybe he'll be here. Or if I do this in the band recital, then he'll come and watch me march at football or whatever it was. Those things manifest to where it's not even about me, it's about me working
And
the
what you can
relationship
offer.
and
Mm-hmm.
what I can offer. And what are 15-year-old boys talking about at all times? Sex.
And
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 so that's what I
and
wanted
and
at the time was attention.
incorrectly, right? And
Yes.
incorrectly oftentimes. And I apologize for cutting you off. I'm gonna be completely transparent here. Hopefully
Mhm.
this don't mess me up. Attachment stuff gives me headaches.
It's
It gives me
hard,
headaches
yes.
because it's so hard. And if you see in the chat here, because we're talking about
Mhm.
sex, there's spam stuff coming up.
Oh, wow, I've never seen that happen before.
Naked, XYZ strips without clothing. You know what I mean? And because
So
we're
easy to
talking
get
about
access
daddy
to
issues
it.
and sex. And this
Yes.
is why, completely off topic, but this is why I say
Mhm.
talk to your children about sex. It's easier to get on than ABC Mouse. If
Yeah,
I try to use ABC Mouse, the free version, I can't get on it. But if my son somehow logs on to Pornhub,
it's easy.
instant. And all he has to do is click, yes, I'm 18. That's a whole other
Mhm.
thing. But the,
Mhm.
the attachment stuff gives me headaches because I'm like, I don't know. And one thing I really loved about Taylor is she was like, you can be secure, like present secure, and then kind of
Mhm.
go in and out of all the things. And I
Mhm.
think this is close to dismissive, but I had a client who was just like, I had sex at
Mhm.
15 because I wanted to get it over with. Like I
Mhm.
knew, like this idea of my virginity is the prize and who should I pick and all this. I just want to get it over with, get it
Mhm.
out, and go on about my business.
Mhm.
How horrible is that?
Mhm.
I don't know anybody with a romantic first time story. If you have one and you want to share, please
Facts.
inbox me. I will not use your name. But I don't know anybody with a romantic first time experience, and that's not what it should be about. And it goes back to the messaging.
Mhm.
I don't know if this is an appropriate time to say this
Mhm.
particular piece, but I put on my stories about the Electra complex. Have you heard of this
Yes, I
before?
saw that. Please tell us what that is.
So we're all familiar with the Oedipus complex, or I've heard that more often than this.
Mhm.
And it talks about how a lot of people say it's when a boy wants to have sex with his mom, but that's not really what it is. It's the
Mhm.
boy being in competition with the mom, with the dad
Mhm.
for the mom's
For the
attention.
attention. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
the Electra complex is essentially the opposite of that for young
Mhm.
women. Now,
Mhm.
Freud was a flawed clinician, okay? And so I'm not going to get too deep into quoting Freud, but he does talk about the psychosexual development, which basically is like the development of personality. And
Mhm.
there is some sexual developmental pieces within that. And I thought that was interesting when we talk about daddy issues. So you can look up the psychosexual development stages. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but
Yeah.
there is a oral, anal, phallic, latent, and genital stage. So the phallic stage, so that is basically when children start to discover their genitals. So this is, I think, a little earlier nowadays, but it's anywhere between 3 and 6. And this corresponds with these, the Oedipus and the Electra complex. So when we are coming into knowledge of our physical selves sexually, it's being associated with mommy and daddy issues. That's just, I don't want to say naturally ingrained, because again, Freud was flawed, but to think about this theory and how our relationship with our parents is correlated to our knowledge of ourselves physically.
Going and then the message and what we see. And
if you think about how strong messaging is, think about the fact that kids almost come into this world knowing how to use iPhones. Like they almost come into this world like fully versed on social media, and that is not by mistake. So we have to be the drivers of those messages. And when we think about our own experiences and trying to redo those programming, it's important to think about these messages and where they come from. The daddy issues associated to us not being present in our sex life is a real thing. Even the idea of calling your partner daddy in bed.
Ooh.
I don't know where the hell that comes from. I don't know why that is a thing. You know what I mean?
I am personally not comfortable with that. But yes, that's another thing. Like it's fetishized.
Yeah.
That right?
It is. It is. And I'm gonna say I'm not necessarily opposed. However, why not? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what is and I have never really investigated like what is that about, but I want to be prepared. So I thought about it today. I was just like, I'm still sitting with that thing, couch crew. So when it comes up for me, I'll let y'all know.
Yes, but let us know.
Please talk back to us if you do it. If you don't, like, what is that about? I don't know. And I learned it from porn. I'll be perfectly honest. I'm like, okay,
me too.
He seems to like that. I think I'll use it.
Like it again. Like, what about what I like? You know what I'm saying? Kind of going back to that whole thing. And that's and T in the chat is saying that stats have proven that girls without dads are more likely to be promiscuous. And I do write about the promiscuous type in my book and what her story is. And I do have to say, every woman I write about in my book, as I'm defining what daddy issues are, the clingy type, the promiscuous type, the woman on the fence, the daddy's girl, all those women, I have been all of those women. And so it's not like I'm just writing like, oh, yes, let me write about this hoe. That's not what this is.
I know this hoe. Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
I
know her. She is me. Okay. That was my story at one point in my life. And so thank you for sharing that stat, because that is what I think people know generally, but they just kind of stay there and they don't go any further as to like what her trauma story may have been.
And if I can add a piece to that too, in Black and Brown communities, there's another phenomenon called precocious puberty. So basically what that is early puberty. I heard you make mention on in your holiday blues training about when you would go home, grandma would make mention of like your hips spreading and things like that. For a lot of us, this happens early, and this happens early because of our relationship to trauma. I can't speak for other communities, but I really feel like as a Black woman, we're kind of born with it in our DNA. It's just passed down. Epigenetics is a thing, but it is. So it's further perpetuated by having absent parents,
right?
Being physically punished. So spanking a child, I don't want to say physical abuse, because spanking is not necessarily abuse, but it's a fine line. But having those types of traumas in your home aids in the progression of your puberty. And so you have 13-year-old girls who look like 20-year-old women. And you have parentified children who've been put in adult places, which again happens when a parent is absent, specifically the father, because the mom needs a helpmate. So she may not look at her daughter as the father figure, but she's looking at her as the second parent sometimes. And then you have this culture of, instead of investigating like what's happening with this child, oh, she just fast. Oh, she
Exactly.
just this.
That's the thing.
She out there fucking around, and she out there doing. So then these children hear these messages, and
And what do you
then they
think they're
go
thinking
out.
of it?
Well, am I supposed to be doing that? Is that okay? And so they
Mm-hmm.
go, and then they get labeled daddy's girl. Like not daddy's
Yeah.
girl, but they got daddy's
They got
issues,
that
you know?
issues. Yeah.
So
That's
yeah.
definitely that's something that actually came up in a conversation I had earlier, just
Ooh,
about
Tiara's in there
how
speaking truth.
yeah,
Sorry.
ain't it? She said a lot of women, if you guys can't see in the chat, a lot of women call men daddy because they ultimately want a father, not a spouse or a sexual partner. And that is definitely a thing. We are replaying the things that we saw growing up, but then we're also affected by our absences, the gaps and deficits in our lives. And I think that's what Tara is saying. The woman that I had a conversation with earlier about just people commenting on her body, that's that adultification piece, for young Black girls. That is a thing where, oh, she's grown and she thinks she's this and that, when it's really, I have nothing to do with that. Just like daddy issues are not your fault. Like nobody can put that on you, the fact that he was as present or not so present in your life and how that affects you. How we respond is what we're working on now as adults, right? And I'm thinking about just what we have control over as I'm getting into this next question about connection. And this is one thing I really want people to walk away with, because this has been coming up a lot in my work recently. Dissociation, which for those of you who don't know, it's really just that if this is your body, and if in an ideal world we were always connected walking through life, mind, body, and soul, we would look like this. Dissociation is that separation of our mind and our body, soul, whatever that may look like for you. It's on a spectrum. You could be daydreaming it or zone out, quote unquote, and that's dissociating, right? Where you don't really feel like you're here, but I'm here, but I'm not here, is what people may kind of resonate with the most. That's dissociating. And a lot of times when I was having all the sex and I was just giving up what I thought would please someone, or just have a man in my life just to get the attention, I was barely there. I was physically there, but my mind was somewhere else. And I don't want to get too graphic or trigger anyone, but it was very reminiscent of a sexual assault, where sexual assault survivors, they disconnect because they don't want to deal with the pain in the moment. And that is what trauma does to us, right? So it's our brain's way, like you said, of keeping us alive. So I'm wondering, when we're talking about daddy issues, the scripts, the things, the messages that we've learned, how it relates to relationships, us connecting to other people intimately. But now we're talking about that physical connection. So
Yes.
what do you have to say about that?
I love that question. And if you heard me kind of holding back my uncomfortable laughter, that's my defense mechanism when I get nervous, because I know that feeling. I remember being engaged in activity and like looking at my nails and being like, I really need a feeling. Like, what is that? Just because this was for him. It wasn't for me. So it starts with you. It absolutely starts with you. This is not a masturbation thing. This is a diagnostic thing. Touch your body. And I'm not just talking about your vulva, ladies. I'm not just talking about your vagina. Feel the sensation of your fingertips on your skin. Explore your body, because it's important for you to know every inch of your body, or as much as you were comfortable with knowing. Look at your body. Again, as a mom, one of the things that happens a lot is my clients are not connected with their body because they don't recognize it. Okay, I was bad in college. Say what you will. Okay. Say what you will. And I thought I was fat. Okay. But looking back, I was bad. 2 kids later, it's looking bad, but in a different way. But I have to take the time to look at my body, get in front of a mirror, and give appreciation and express gratitude to your body. My least favorite part of my body is my stomach. So
Mhm.
that is the time I spend that's the area I spend the most time with. So I
Mhm.
would challenge you to get in front of the mirror. And if you are a mom, hold your stomach and say, thank
Mhm.
you for being my kid's first safe place. Thank
Mhm.
you for
Mhm.
nourishing my body. For your breast, if they don't sit up as high as they used to, thank you for feeding my children. Like just
Mhm.
giving gratitude to your body is number one. Number
Mhm.
two, move your body.
Mhm.
Feel your body move and know what that sensation, that experience feels like. And a lot of times clients shy away from that because they think I'm telling them to exercise. I hate exercise, so that is not what I'm telling you to do.
Facts.
I am telling you to get up. I would right now, but after
Mhm.
dinner time. But get up, sway your hips,
Mhm.
see what that feels like. Hear what's popping. Okay.
Okay.
Like it's all these like knees like Megan challenges. Do it
Mhm.
and do it for you in front of a
Mhm.
mirror or whatever. And then if we talk about partner connectivity, allow your partner to explore your body.
Mhm.
And that can be very uncomfortable, especially for trauma survivors. And so do all of these things in baby steps
Right.
as much as you are comfortable with. There's a
Mhm.
wonderful exercise that I prescribe after a couple sessions with couples, but it's called Sensate Focus. And
Mhm.
so both partners will be naked and vulnerable,
Mhm.
and you take turns being the giver and the receiver.
Mhm.
So you will touch your partner the way you like to be touched
Mhm.
so that they can experience that sensation. And in that, you might discover, or your partner might discover, oh my God, it feels good when you
Mhm.
touch the inside of my thigh. Now, if you're in a
Mhm.
heterosexual relationship, men don't pay attention to the insides of their thighs. They like,
Mhm.
that's a girl area, but
Mhm.
you sharing that sensation with them,
Mhm.
and being present in the moment. No phones, no TV, none of that stuff. Make sure
Mhm.
it's just time for you. And then allow them to do the same to you. And again, baby steps. You can do it where you say, okay, on Tuesday night, I'll be the giver. And then on
Mhm.
Thursday night, you'll be the giver.
Mhm.
And so you can spread it out.
Mhm.
Breathing exercises with your partner, learning
Mhm.
to sync your breath. Um, that's a tantric practice. I shy away from
Mhm.
using the names because a lot of times people don't understand what it is and they
Mhm.
shy away from using it. But
Mhm.
breathing exercises, sitting forehead to forehead, looking at your partner for 3 seconds in the eye.
Oh, now that is some powerful work. That's almost as intense as mirror work when you're looking at yourself in the mirror for 3
I
seconds.
my my husband probably hates when I tell this story, but because I tell it a lot, because I was so out there, really not focused and not present. The first time I actually made love, and he wanted to look me in the eye and stopped and said, "Why
Mhm.
won't you look at me?" I felt
Mhm.
so exposed.
Mhm.
I felt
Mhm.
so exposed because why do you need to look at me? Don't be trying to look at my soul. What you trying to do? And it worked, and we got married. But you know, that was probably the most intimate thing I had ever done up to that point.
Mhm. Mhm.
So look at your partner for 3 seconds, uninterrupted, in the eyes. Say nothing.
Mhm.
If
Mhm.
you laugh, start over. And
Mhm.
then we need to talk about, well, what's that laughter about? Where did that come
Mhm.
from for you? And
Mhm.
I'm a therapist, so my question's a little
Right.
different, but y'all, but
That's the
those are some
professional
of the
grade
ways.
questions.
I had a client call me
Mhm.
out on that. She was like, "Don't nobody talk like that." So how I need to say it? You're right, but those are just a few of the ways that you can get connected with your partner. But it really
Mhm.
is about first getting into your body before
Yes.
you can connect with your partner.
Yeah, I love that. I think Tiara in the chat said something I love. She said, change the story of your body.
Mm-hmm.
I love that because I talk a
Mm-hmm.
lot about how, trauma shifts and skews our entire worldview, period.
Mm-hmm.
And people are no longer safe when we're built for connection. So that's a conflict. It's like I'm supposed to want to be in this thing, but then people hurt me and I don't feel safe. And
Yeah.
like you said earlier, my brain is designed to keep me alive. And this is weird when I'm told to connect and get closer to someone. And so what you're talking
You need
about
to have
here,
Tiara on because I like that, but I
yeah,
don't know
I
what it
get to
means.
I know. And see, this is something that we're actually going to be meeting in a couple of weeks. I heard about her from
Good.
another person I met from Canada who also does the daddy issues work. So I'm starting to meet new
Oh,
daddy
that's
issues
awesome.
experts. So I'm really excited about starting the conversation. And what I'm thinking that she's meeting is this piece about recreating experiences or just
Mhm.
creating new experiences, because trauma teaches us one thing, and it may be some, like, just to keep it simple, I'm going to die if I connect with my partner, because last time I connected
Right.
with someone, the first time I did, I haven't since, because that experience was so traumatic, it turned me off. So if I connect in this way, my body's going to remember, and I'm going to feel like
Mhm.
I'm dying. I'm going to be that uncomfortable. But what we need to do is recreate these new pathways, these neural pathways in our brains that say, I can actually associate something positive with this experience. What you're talking about here, as far as touching ourselves, engaging in that way, grounding ourselves, helps us to do that, to
Mhm.
create a new story and change the story of our body, and how we engage and interact and connect with ours and other people. Because we've been talking this whole time about the messages that we received from daddy, how our daddy issues may impact that. And a lot of that, I guess, a theme, if I could kind of pull it together for everyone, is that
Yeah.
loss of power and control. The fact that someone else or
Absolutely.
something else is speaking for us, and what you are talking about now is how we can take that power back. Because daddy issues, aka emotional trauma, is that loss of power. I don't feel like I have a say. I don't feel like I have a voice. So how can I get that back? And one of the most vulnerable spaces, sex, right? Like, how can I actually re-engage the way that I want to? Because Michelle
Mhm.
K is right in the chat. Like, in the Black community, we don't talk about sex. We talk about it, at least in a negative way. She says we talk about it, but intimacy
Mhm.
is not talked about. So it's talked about, but in such a disgusting negative way.
And you know what the crazy part about it is, I became a professional
Mm-hmm.
when I started talking about intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
I was
Mm-hmm.
never talking about intimacy before
Mm-hmm.
I got licensed. It's like a switch went off, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, you know what? There's this piece." Because I think she's absolutely right. And I speak for myself. I've had so much sex without intimacy because
Facts.
sex in my community, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
not talking about the Black community on the whole, but just where I'm from, was
Mm-hmm.
really talked about as, I guess, a, something you do on a Friday night because you're bored. Call someone
Mm-hmm.
up, and I knew it was the way you got someone pregnant, but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know there's other nuances that just people were not talking about. So I totally agree with that. We are not talking about intimacy, and that is the piece that
That is the
I want to
problem.
pass on to my children. Yeah, that's what I want
Mm-hmm.
to pass on to them, is
Mm-hmm.
the intimacy and pleasure piece. Nobody talked to me about the conversations with my friends were about, how do we get him off? What are the things
Mm-hmm.
we do to help him reach pleasure? And none of us were talking about our own pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
We just happened to luck out if he was good, whatever the hell that meant. I don't even know what that means now. So yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And so I'm going to invite you guys to get your last minute questions in. Jessica's here for a little Q&A. If you have any, I am available too. I just want to wrap this up for us and make that connection, because I promoted it as daddy issues and sex. It's a
Mhm.
serious conversation. It's one that I think we need to have, because we're clearly not having them in the healthy ways. And we literally have to unlearn the narratives that we have been carrying with us, because there are blocks that obviously hinder an intimate, meaningful connection, with something that should be, and I don't say should a lot, but I'm going to say that should be
Mhm.
a beautiful, amazing thing, right? Sex being that. How can you take control? And if you are not confident in this area, what is that block for you, and how do the messages from your father's absence and or presence and anywhere in between, how does that impact it? And then think about how that spills over and translates into other areas of your life.
Mhm.
I go back to that voice piece. Why is it that you may be silencing or shrinking yourself? I had that conversation earlier today about how we shrink ourselves to allow other people to do their thing. And that could be in the
Mhm.
bedroom too. I learned maybe, for example, from my mom to shrink myself because my dad was a big presence and I watched their dynamic and their interaction. That's a daddy issue. The
Yeah.
fact that you learn how to interact with other people. My son is 4, he's almost 5, and he's talking about using his big voice. Apparently, there's a book about that now. So
I love
it's so
it.
cute. Like he's like, Mommy, I'm going to use my big voice because so and so tried to push me. So they
Mhm.
call them to the carpet and they give them a safe space at school in pre-K to talk about their feelings. And so he is learning at a really early age to be able to do that. And sex seems like it's a really nuanced thing. It's so big,
Yeah, this
but
this
so
idea
important.
of yeah, this idea of shrinking yourself, and I apologize again for
No,
cutting
you're
you off. I
good.
get so excited.
I know you do.
You know, we're friends and colleagues, and we do a lot of things
Mhm.
together. So I remember you saying something in a
Mhm.
group, and the
Mhm.
response being, "Who benefits from you playing small?" And
Mhm.
that's just how I'm operating right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in sex, there's so many times where women are afraid to show up and afraid
Mm.
to say, hey, this is what I like. This is what I expect. These are
Mhm.
my boundaries, because they will be seen, number one,
Mhm.
and they'll be
Mhm.
judged. Right?
Mhm.
Like if you like, I need a strong shower rod because that's my thing, then some insecure man is thinking, well, who else you doing that with? Where did that come from? Who gives
Mhm.
a fuck? Either,
Right.
sorry, Christian.
Oh,
This
you
is how I
fine.
talk on my page, y'all. Sorry. But it's like, I should, if you don't like it, that's fine. We can have a conversation, but I
Mhm.
shouldn't have to shrink myself and shrink my desires to make you feel
Mhm.
comfortable, because there's room enough for both of them. There's
Mhm.
room enough in this space for us to do that. And that's what's lacking from a lot of sexual relationships, is conversation. And when
Mhm.
we link that to daddy issues, there are clients who had present fathers, but they weren't allowed to speak. They
Mhm.
weren't, a child should be seen and not heard.
Mhm.
They weren't allowed
Mhm.
to make eye contact with their parents,
Mhm. Mhm.
especially daddy.
Mhm.
Girl, if you look at me like that, I'm gonna make them eyes roll across the floor, is what one of my
Mhm.
clients said to me. I
Mhm.
couldn't imagine a man speaking to me like that. How
Mhm.
scary must that be?
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know? And then you get into an intimate relationship where you're like, I disagree with this thing, but I can't say it.
Mhm.
This sexual interaction doesn't make me comfortable. It hurts, but I can't say it
Mhm.
because you weren't
Mhm.
allowed to use your big voice. I can't wait to see this new generation. I got a 3-year-old who tells me, Mommy, you may not put me to bed. First of all,
Yes.
okay,
Okay.
let's have a conversation because you got to go. You can go
Right.
in 5 minutes or you can go now.
Hasn't happened. So.
You know, but because she feels confident enough to say it, it grinds my husband's gears.
Mhm.
But I said, you have to give her that space, because you will be the face she sees when she stands up
Mhm.
to the next man, or she
Oh.
says the thing to the next man. You will be
Mhm.
the face she sees and the voice she hears.
Mm. Oh, I'm gonna leave it right there. That was a good look. We didn't even plan that. I like the way you wrapped that thing up because literally we could talk about this for so long. And if we need to have you back, I know you're totally fully willing. Um, I I'm just gonna put you on the spot, but this is something that I just wanted to at least start tonight, right, guys? So like
Mhm.
even after this conversation, if anyone has questions or comments or something we didn't touch or didn't touch the way you wanted us to, let us know. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and let Jessica tell you how you can find her and what she has going on so that you can continue to
Yeah.
get to know her and become part of her crew. So let us know how to find you.
So my crew is the Visionaries, and I will be so ecstatic if you guys would follow me on Instagram at Envision Counseling. It's IN Vision Counseling. So I want you all to walk in the vision for your life. See what I did there? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
My website is envisioncounselingllc.com,
Mm-hmm.
and these letters at the end, the MSS, you may not be familiar with, but I consider myself to be a mom support specialist, and I am trying to cultivate trash parents all over this nation. So,
Mm-hmm.
trash parents are thoughtful, rested, accountable, secure in their parenting, and happy. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
The reason I chose to call it trash parenting and trash parents is because too often we get this message that if we are not sacrificing for our children at all costs, then we're
Mhm.
trash. If we're taking too much time for ourselves, then we're trash. But what people need to realize is our children are happy, secure, growing, evolving little human beings. We're doing good.
Mhm.
And moms need time for themselves.
Mhm.
Moms need the space to pour into themselves so that they can give to their children. I
Mhm.
hate the empty cup narrative, the whole you can't pour from an empty cup, because that indicates that we have to bend. We have to
Mhm.
change in some way. But I believe moms should be pouring into themselves as a vase and doing so
Mhm.
so abundantly that their children, their husbands, their friends, everyone benefits from the overflow. So,
Mhm.
if you are interested in becoming a trash parent, hopefully Instagram will give me my page back. So, I'm still
Right.
fighting for that. But in the meantime, you can follow me at Envision Counseling. And then, of course, once I get my page back, I will share that on Envision. So thank you for
Yes.
having me on again, Christian. It's always a good time.
Always, child. I'm gonna go ahead and let you go. Y'all go ahead and say bye to Jessica in the chat, and I'm gonna wrap up the show. Thank you, Jess.
Bye.
All right, so you guys, you have met the incomparable Jessica Van, and I hope that you learned something tonight. This was a good time, like I said, just to start a conversation because this is something that is just so nuanced that we can go a lot of different directions, and it's impossible to get to it all tonight. But I want to respect your time. I also want to say goodnight to my littles, and so I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you so much for engaging with us in the chat. Jessica, she's backstage right now. You're getting all the love. I think she can see it right here. I also want to say something she didn't say, which is that moms talk about sex too. And should she choose, moms can get it in as well. Okay. So if you don't walk away with anything tonight, then please keep in mind that we are talking about those blocks that help you be your authentic self in the bedroom tonight, but really wherever you want to connect, whether that is by yourself and with yourself or with other people in your lives. I want to point out that I will be dropping some new exciting content. And so if you want to join my email list, you can go to my website. You can find me at couchwithchristian.com. You can find me at couchwithchristian on Instagram so that you can get to know what I have coming up. Look out for Is It Me? 3 ways daddy issues shows up in my relationships. I'm going to take you deep in this online course. And I'm going to tell you, yes, it is you, because we're talking about accountability and what you can do to take control. That is what this is about, right? Taking yourself to another level by facing the things, right? That's what Jessica was telling us about a little bit earlier. Can you look at yourself 3 seconds in the mirror? Right? How can you get to a space that you want to be in and conquer, overcome, recover from daddy issues by taking note of what you need to pay attention to? And so I really appreciate you guys because you're here with me. And I've had a lot of engagement tonight. So I'm really excited. Please like and share, tag your friends, get into this replay. If you haven't already seen it, go ahead and get into the comments and I will engage. Super excited to meet you, Tuti. And Dav, I got to know who you are too. Y'all are really getting it in. I've been Christian Jackson. Good night, everyone.